Our sweet spot starts at around $4 million of capital raise and goes up above that. 75 million is the convenient per year maximum. So a lot of overnight success stories that took 8 years to get to this point. Not many companies are really ready immediately to have a huge success.
My name's Sabrina Romanov. Super excited to be talking today with Rod Turner. He's the founder and CEO of Manhattan Street Capital, a serial entrepreneur, and really looking forward to learning about AI's use in finance. Rod, would you mind telling the audience a little bit about your background?
Sure. So I started out my career in England as a professional electrical engineer on a nuclear power station, and I figured I needed to progress my career faster, so I switched from that field to marketing and selling computers in England. Then I moved to the US, and then I got into startup companies. So most of my business life has been doing high-tech startup companies. Before this one, I've done 6 prior high-tech startup companies to liquid outcomes. One of those was a company called Ashton Tate, which dates back a long time. They made a product called DBase. We built it to be the leading database for microcomputers at the time. This is before Windows became big. The second one was Symantec, the company that made Norton Antivirus. My team built the Norton Antivirus and launched it. And my company today, Manhattan Street Capital, I launched it 9.5 years ago because of Reg A+. The SEC was dragged kicking and screaming into the game of allowing companies to raise money online. We specialize in helping companies to market themselves to investors to raise money online. And our primary vehicle is a thing called Regulation A+. So that's what the company does. We advise and we put companies on our platform and facilitate investors investing, and we bring in all the different service providers to help companies go public if appropriate, or at least to raise money in order to grow the companies faster.
And what size companies do you typically work with?
Mature startups is perhaps the best way to put it, because our sweet spot starts at around $4 million of capital raise and goes up above that. So a lot of overnight success stories that took 8 years to get to this point. Not many companies are really ready immediately to have a huge success. But usually they've figured it out by now. Now they're ready to raise money to scale up because they've proven their model.
Okay, awesome. And how do you use AI as part of that?
We have competitors now. When I launched the company, there weren't any. We were one of the first players in this space. Now we have a lot of competitors. We're more of a boutique, and we're more advisory, more expertise oriented as to what we do and helping people figure out how to navigate the process successfully. So it was a natural evolution of what we do to make our own custom chatbot based on ChatGPT. So that's what we've done, and it's working really well. I mean, I would prefer it to be getting more queries every day than it's getting, but it is growing nicely. And what we've done is we've got a lot of expertise in the form of videos and blogs and FAQs within our website. So we're probably the leader in our space in terms of helping company CEOs and CFOs figure out if they should use this method and how to use it, so that they self-qualify before they approach us. They already figured it out. So it's very self-serving that we do that, but it works well. So with ChatGPT, essentially to some extent displacing Google search, we kind of needed to deal with that. That's another reason for having this chatbot, so we don't lose out to the extent that chatbots become the thing. We're plugged into that space. I would say the average executive out there running their business isn't fully aware of how powerful ChatGPT, Perplexity AI, and other large language models are. But they're more likely to ask intelligent questions on our platform because that's what we do, right? So we get some pretty savvy questions. I mean, I had one guy, CEO type guy, who asked a question and then a follow-up. He got down to about 6 levels of follow-up questions. And I'm not kidding. Some of those questions and answers that he got were very sophisticated stuff that most securities attorneys, a lot of it was about, are you allowed to do this and how can I do that from a legitimate regulatory standpoint? And our chatbot came through with bells on. I mean, and most securities attorneys would have said, yeah, you need to pay me to get that advice. It was pretty sophisticated. So we do get that. We get some basic queries too. And I'm always adjusting it. You're adjusting the persona of the chatbot so it doesn't cross regulatory lines, doesn't break the rules, and so that it's giving good advice. It's kind of
and
cool.
What's been the biggest challenge building it out so far?
I would say getting people to use it has been the biggest single issue. I've been shocked. I thought people would love it because it's free. It's ChatGPT Pro, customized. They've got to be interested in this, otherwise why are they on our platform? So that's been the biggest thing. And apart from that, it's being scared about not wanting to take risks, not wanting to have our platform provide answers that the regulators would stomp on us for, being very careful about that. So those have been the 2 difficult things. But Actually, it's been working really well. And what I like is, even though I see things that I'm improving and tweaking and optimizing, it's doing a damn good job.
Yeah, I mean that's the cool thing. You can iterate on it over time. You can see what questions
Yep,
people are really asking. You
yep,
can identify gaps in its knowledge, and then you can
yep,
fill in those gaps with your human expertise from, decades working in this
yeah.
space. I'm curious for a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners who are listening, they're probably wondering, how did you do this? What was the tool set you used? How did you upload the documents? Did you have any issue? And what is your workflow for continually improving the chatbot?
There are now many different chatbots, right? So the one we use is Custom GPT. It hasn't been that difficult. We basically have documents that serve the needs of investors and documents that serve the needs of companies that are raising money. So it was an obvious choice to serve the companies because they're the ones who are visiting our homepage and checking out whether or not they should do this stuff. We're doing things now for investors too, but that's secondary. So that choice was straightforward. And once having made that choice, then it was really easy to decide what to include, which is basically all of our available content. All that Google already sees has now been plugged into our chatbot. And then really the difficult work has been presenting it in a way that people can understand what to do and understand they can ask follow-up questions or things of that ilk. And adjusting its style so that it's volunteering more assistance and not misleading people. And from a selling point of view, not understating what we do. We don't want it to be too salesy, but we don't want the chatbot to ignore the wonderful services my company's providing.
Any tips for other owners out there trying to incorporate this type of chatbot and dealing maybe with some of the same issues? How do you tweak it to sell your service, but not too pushy, to not cross those
Yeah.
boundaries per industry? What are some tips and tricks that you've worked,
You
or
know,
any prompt engineering tips and tricks that worked out?
we get a lot of customers, companies that want to work with us, coming to us because they find us through organic search, mostly Google. And that's in play, that's at risk these days with what's going on with ChatGPT and others. So initially my reaction was, oh my God, we got to protect ourselves. So we'll state on our site, no man shall pass. You mustn't use our data and learn from it because we value our expertise and we don't want it commoditized, right? So that was a reasonable decision. So we did that, and that caused a lovely positive shift to where now we're getting a lot of people finding us through the chat GPTs of the world, whereas before they were, to some extent, not finding us.
That's a really great point because people do ask me about, I guess, ask engine optimization, new term arising because of generative AI. And it's interesting that your initial reaction was to kind of close off from it. So what made you kind of change your mind and have that light bulb moment that instead of closing the gates, you should open the
Well, we were
gates and see
getting
how
less
that goes?
inquiries. We were losing organic traffic, and it was obvious. It wasn't a subtle thing. And when I realized that it wasn't just the chat GPTs, it was Google too, because, they're probably towing the line and not accessing your data when you tell them not to, unlike some of the other players. In any case, whether or not they are, we were losing organic traffic. So I decided to encourage it. And that's
Gotcha.
another issue, right? Because we're using ChatGPT as the basis for our custom chatbot. We don't want to irritate Google Gemini because they know that ChatGPT is one of their largest competitors. So we didn't want to turn them off. So I put positive vibe stuff on our website to keep Google happy to some extent. I actually followed a line of inquiry with Google to see were we harming ourselves by using a ChatGPT based chatbot, and I got no useful answers whatsoever.
It is interesting that it was ultimately a data-driven decision. That sounds like you looked at the organic traffic, it was clearly going down, and so you decided to switch your strategy, and the data shows it's clearly working. Like, it sounds like the
Yeah,
organic
right.
traffic is way up.
Because this is a regulated space, you have to be very careful. That's the most nerve-wracking thing, right? Is I don't want a regulator to come and ask some tricky questions and get answers they shouldn't get, and then put us in the penalty box, because in this space, you're talking with giant regulators that are remarkably unforgiving.
Did you end up having to use any outside tooling, like LLM operations toolings, to help implement those guardrails? Or I guess, how do you make sure that your answers do
So
comply with regulation?
I give guidance to the personality of the chatbot, essentially, asking it to avoid this subject, don't disclose this kind of information.
Well, that's a really great point and it's amazing that that's worked for you because there could be some people listening in highly regulated industries who might be fearful of trying this approach because
Yeah,
of the regulations. It's actually a great data point that you figured out a way to make it work for your use case and still stay clear of all the regulations and compliance.
yeah. Well, you're particularly right with the FDA, right? We deal with we help a lot of biotech companies. It's easier to raise money online for biotech companies than some others because we're dealing with human ailments. People care about that. So it's easier to raise money. So I have a lot of experience with them. For them, it's doubly intimidating doing an online raise because they've got the FDA they don't want to offend and the SEC, the regulator for raising money.
And do you use the chatbot for any other part of the life cycle? So I know we've talked a lot about it for visitors who are coming in organically through your site, but do you also have other chatbots either for internal purposes for your team or to help existing clients or investors?
Yeah, so we use it for existing clients and investors. We're increasingly getting into that. So you can have obviously multiple different flavors of your chatbot. So we're doing that. We have a search feature in the website. Now it provides an AI response from the chatbot as well as the actual search results that they might otherwise have expected to get. We don't get many investor inquiries because most investors are interacting with an offering page on our platform, but it has the entire personality of the offering of the company. It doesn't look like us. It looks like the company, which it should do, right? So they don't think about it as us so much as they do the company. There'll come a time when those companies will want to use a chatbot. We can help them with that, but they're not far enough along yet that they want to do that. And it's scary from a regulatory standpoint too. More because when you're actually dealing with investors and you're selling them your stock, which these companies are doing, you've got to be very careful how you communicate to those investors.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I imagine there's a lot of like personal and relationship building in that process of communicating with investors that's hard
Yeah.
to replicate or replace entirely with AI.
Yeah, it's going to happen, right? I mean, it will happen, but you want to make sure you don't put a foot wrong with the regulators, the SEC especially, because they are a giant. A question is enough to kill you. You know, you don't want to be getting questions from the SEC.
That regulatory aspect is really the scariest thing. How's the reaction been from clients who have been using it? Are they surprised that your chatbot works as well as it does?
Yeah, well, I see that in a number of ways, right? I see somebody asking a question and then asking follow-ups that make it clear they weren't expecting it to be this good. I see that, and I get praise from people. You know, for a while, we have a large company list of companies who have already engaged with us and are staying in touch. So we send out updates periodically, and I get a lot of people say, yeah, good move, smart move, Rod, good thing to do. So that's nice. You know, for me, it's really rewarding when I see it doing stuff because I think, I mean, you're far more aware than I am that the ambient level of awareness of what you can do via large language models isn't very high. I mean, there's a lot of people that are really ignorant or afraid and have heard rumors. You know, maybe they're 2 years out of date in terms of their perception as a
And also the term chatbot has really negative connotations because it
yeah,
just brings to mind, 10 years ago when you ask a chatbot, it just can't answer
nothing much.
anything and it's
Yeah.
a total joke.
Yeah, right. I mentioned to you earlier in our preamble discussion, and I mentioned I worked on a nuclear power station, and they had this AI system that would take an error message or two and recommend to the engineers what to do, but it was absolutely dumb. Basically, it was dumb. So you knew pretty much whatever it said, it was stupid. And there were these long list of error messages and recommendations of things to do. No one would listen. Today, if you're actually applying state-of-the-art technology, now we're talking really serious AI that could do powerful things, obviously.
It's really interesting you bring up the timeline. So you've obviously been part of many different hype cycles in technology. You've kind of seen it all. How do you feel about AI right now? Does it feel bubbly to you, overhyped? What is your kind of thought on that pulse of the market?
Well, it's definitely bubbly in terms of the very high valuations of a bunch of companies, some of whom are really only peripherally leveraging AI, in my opinion. So yeah, there's a lot of bubbly nature to the market, which is a bit scary in terms of the correction that will probably come. But there is so many great strides being made, and the rate of progress is such that it's mind-altering, really. But there was an announcement yesterday by Google about how their quantum computing model is, so much more powerful already at doing things. Obviously, they're doing it in a microcosm. It's not ready to come out of the box and do real things yet. But give it a few years, and they'll start coming through. And it's mind-boggling how much intelligence there will be and then how much we can do with it. It's scary, disruptive in terms of people's employment and what human beings will be needed for. Pretty scary. Exciting as all get out as to what you can do that you couldn't do before, what you can understand that you couldn't understand before. Pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah, I share the same viewpoint. It still feels very bubbly. I know agents are hyped right now in tech. A lot of startups are raising money kind of on that profit. And I think it is overhyped and bubbly at the moment, but I think it's actually underhyped in terms of the long-term impact that a lot of these newer technologies will have over the next couple decades is kind of
Yeah,
how
yeah.
I'm viewing it.
I was in a waiting room to see a doctor for an eye thing, and I knew she was going to prescribe an eye drop that I didn't want at the full potency. I was in the waiting room for 5 or 10 minutes, and I did a quick search using Perplexity AI to find a compounding pharmacy in California that would make a low dilution and get with high recommendations, right? And I got two, and I selected one. When I went in to see the doctor, I was able to get her to prescribe it to that pharmacy because I got the damn information. That was a little tiny example of uplifting my life because I didn't want to have the slammed eyesight problem with the eye drops they were going to otherwise give me.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy just all the different ways AI is kind of permeated our lives. One of my favorite use cases right now is using advanced voice mode for ChatGPT while driving. I
Yeah,
can literally just like vent to it and it asks me questions and we end up
yeah, yeah.
talking about philosophy and books. And then at the end, I ask it to like summarize what we talked about with any like key takeaways, actionable
Yeah,
items, or like
that's
things you've learned about me. And it's just really fun. Yeah.
very nice. I saw one of your videos where you said that. I thought, I haven't done that yet. I'm going to do that as a test. But I had another thing where I have a couple of expensive awnings on my house and both of them stopped working, right? And I went back to the manufacturer and their service technicians couldn't figure it out. It's like, what am I going to do? And I went online and searched, couldn't get anywhere. And I used Perplexity Claude for that and had it look for, the same stuff, right? Service providers, highly rated. And it found one because my admin assistant had been working on this for some time too. She gave up. So that caused me to find somebody that came and did the work for a sensible price. So now my awnings work. Simple stuff, but it was really winding me up that I couldn't use those expensive awnings.
Especially for local service providers, it's like a lot of work, just like research them, contact them, wait for them to get back to you, and then figure out if they can even do the job.
Yeah,
And like
right.
you're not an expert in it. Like I'm not an expert in awnings or most things related to my home, right?
Yeah,
And so
right.
I need to like check what they're telling me. Am I missing any information or context that they should know about before they make a trip out here? All of these different things you can pre-clarify with Perplexity. And honestly, you just become more informed so that when you actually talk to service providers, you ask better questions, you can
Yeah,
give
right.
better answers, just a much more streamlined experience on both sides.
Yeah, yeah. I've had similar situations with nutritional stuff, optimum health and things, and getting conflicting answers. In this case, I got a more precise answer from ChatGPT. When I thought it through, it made sense. It was right. And what I got from Claude wasn't as good, but I couldn't have got those answers in any useful, time efficient manner in the past, right? I mean, this is simple stuff that you can do. So many other things that we'll be able to do. It's going to be pretty exciting. And it already is.
Yeah, is there any other use case like within your team at Manhattan Street Capital that you guys are using AI or ChatGPT for? Maybe unexpected use cases? Would love to hear about those.
Well, I use ChatGPT sometimes because it's the best dictation machine. It doesn't have any errors, unlike all the other things that I try. So when I'm going to make a presentation or a speech or write a document, I like to just start off just talking, get it done. So I use ChatGPT for that. That's obvious and simple, but it really is helpful. Other than that, I will write a draft document, again, using our custom chatbot because it's savvy to what we do. So it accelerates my production of a new document or a new presentation because it's right on the money. So I'll do that. And occasionally our team members will do that too. So it's been helpful. In our space, people tend to buy or rent lists of potential investors, and they pay through the nose and usually it doesn't work worth a damn. I mean, it's been in 9.5 years, there's been so few successes with that. But I'm now working with an email company that uses ChatGPT and has vertically integrated the whole software stack for email provision. And they're doing cold emails cost effectively with great success. First time I've come across such a thing.
What is the big difference there? Because I'm familiar with platforms like Apollo.io for startups. They have like a lead database integrated and you can use ChatGPT in your email sequences. Like, what do you think is making the difference that now this cold outreach is working, but not before?
Yes, so it's not that I'm studying the email space in all its breadth, right? There's a lot more going on than I'm aware of. I'm aware of how it's operating in the capital raising business. What they're doing perhaps differently, but what they're doing is they don't use any of the existing email service providers, right? So they're not restricted by that. And they're doing other intelligent things to navigate the difficult delivery process with email these days because it's getting more and more constrained, as well as intelligently using ChatGPT to draft emails and draft responses. But in this regulated space, you can't automatically do responses that aren't inspected by a human because the ChatGPT could do something, say something you're not allowed to, but it's still working really well. So It's not so much that ChatGPT is the biggest piece of the whole, it's the integration of the whole stack to make email.
Yeah, I can see email deliverability because if you're just buying lists and everybody else has spammed those same
Yeah.
emails, you're gonna have an issue getting into the inbox. And so email delivery is a huge problem even today. It's
Yep.
crazy.
Yeah. I know a guy who's an expert in marketing. He's been around the block a while like me, not a young whippersnapper at this stage. And what he does is he'll pick a topic and ask ChatGPT to draft a series of blog posts on that. And he'll select best ones and then have it draft the blog posts themselves. And then he goes and runs with it and produces a lot of good marketing content. To my mind, there's a risk there that we'll get flooded with mediocre content, of course. So, I don't do that myself, but he's having good success with it.
Yeah, I don't do it either, but when I do, it still only gets me about 70% of the way there. I still
Yeah.
find that I need to take the time to add my expertise, my experiences, my
Yeah.
data points, and I think that makes all the difference. Like I think it's great
Yeah.
if ChatGPT can get me 70% of the way there. Then I can just focus on curating like what my specific experiences were and integrating it throughout the post.
ChatGPT and other advances in AI, amazingly wonderful things happening and bad actors doing things simultaneously, and the regulators not necessarily keeping track and keeping up. So it's scary, but at the same time, it's really wonderful. Something I liked is that they've been doing an experiment in Australia where people with Alzheimer's can use a chatbot to have conversations, keep them engaged and interested and less lonely. And that, to my
Mhm.
mind, is a marvelous application. When you do it well, it can be really a positive thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even in the US, the largest demographic, I believe, right now is that older demographic. And there just aren't many tools built for that demographic. A lot of people want to build for the younger demographic or the up and
Yep.
coming demographic, but think of all the ways that AI could help with mental health,
Yeah. Right.
loneliness,
Right.
potentially like just entertainment or continuing education, continuing learning.
And this is like me digressing, but I met some interesting companies, right? I met a company a couple of years ago where they use virtual reality to treat autistic children. So autistic children get easily distracted and easily get agitated. They create a virtual environment in which to train those children, to give them psychological treatment and so forth, or to teach them things where they're now calm because they create a very calm environment. Works great. It's a service that's provided and is endorsed by the English healthcare system, the National Health Service. Proper
That's
use of,
amazing. Yeah, and you can imagine like AI being layered on top, like a
yeah,
personalized learning element,
yeah.
identifying, oh, this child seems to be struggling with XYZ types of issues. Let's, tweak the program automatically using AI to help emphasize or reinforce those concepts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I want to talk about your background as well. I mean, you've had an amazing career, right? Serial entrepreneur, involved in two IPOs in tech, lots of tech companies, and now in finance. What is your advice to folks out there who are early on in their entrepreneurial career, maybe looking to make the leap? Any just general advice from life lessons learned, having been involved in so many successes?
I could write a book on this. I have a lot of philosophies that I've learned about succeeding as an entrepreneur, succeeding, building businesses and leading teams and things. I've had a lot of fun with all of this and am having a lot of fun with it. I think it comes down to being driven and acting quickly rather than I'll study this for the next 2 years and then I'll come back when I'm ready, by which time the opportunity's already passed. So driven and impatient and then paying close attention and adjusting. When I see a business plan that's 50 pages long from a startup company, I know it's almost always going to be a bad idea because they don't actually know what they're doing and they just fill it up with detail to make up for the fact that they don't have an understanding of what they're doing. A 2-page business plan that's well stated, now we're talking, right? Because they know we don't need the clutter. They just state what we're doing. That's enough. So one of the things I recommend to people who want to get started as entrepreneurs is, depending on the level of confidence and expertise they have, it may be best to go join a startup company that's already somewhat successful in order to get exposed to what it is, what happens, all the moving parts, to see stuff and gain confidence and get the context, because there's so much stuff. In a year or two, they may be ready to go do their own thing. Some people are ready from the get-go, and that's great.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly underrated advice. And most people who reach out to me, for example, from Berkeley, have like undergrads reaching out. And the most common advice I give is to work for a company
Yeah.
and kind of think of it as an apprenticeship.
Yeah.
where you're in the trenches, truly observing what it takes to make a company successful, understanding all the fires that happen every day in startups. It's like most people who are asking that question probably aren't ready to go out on their own. Because as you said, if they're ready, they just do it.
Many.
I've met people who have taken 10 courses on
Yeah.
content creation and
Yeah.
have not published a single post.
One of the things I recommend when you're doing is you have to be committed and positive and enthusiastic and driven to execute, but you do periodically need to pop up. Imagine you're working in the trenches. You got to pause, pop up and do a reality check and sort of check the competitive landscape and make sure that what you're doing is actually the right thing at this point in time. Do that on a regular enough basis, frequently enough that you are not misleading yourself into thinking that because I'm doing it so far, I should keep doing the same thing in the same way. Some of the bigger mistakes I've made have been being so busy doing what I'm doing with the great excellence of execution that I'm not allowing myself time to pay attention to third-party developments once removed. Okay, they don't affect us necessarily over here, but my God, this is significant and I should pay attention to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, this has been great. Is there anything else you want to make sure we talk about before we wrap up?
So I would say from a self-serving point of view, my company's name is Manhattan Street Capital. And those of you in the audience who have enjoyed what we've discussed, we help companies raise money via Reg A Plus through online capital raises. That's our specialty. And we're based in California, San Diego. And if you've got a great company and you want to raise money, come and see us. We'd be delighted to help you, advise you if you should do this and by what. We're not just going to go jumping straight into it with both feet. Just going to figure out, should we do this? That's an obvious thing. But anyway, we'll be pleased to hear from you guys.
Is there a typical minimum revenue number of the startups you work with?
No, actually, it isn't about scale. It's not about how many employees or how many years or scale of revenue or even profits. It's about how amazing is the opportunity. Some companies can be zero revenue, brand new team, kick-ass, amazing strategy, and it's obvious and we can market it because we can explain it. What it's doing is very, very worthwhile. We can raise money all day for those companies. And the reverse isn't true. There was a company, let me explain what I mean by it. There was a company that approached us a couple of years ago. They were determined to go public on the NASDAQ. They had revenues of greater than 40 mil, sizable employee base. They were profitable, not very profitable, with a slow growth rate in a boring business. I didn't consider it a strategic business where the strategic shifts in business were not necessarily in their favor. You want that. You want that strategic trend favoring you, obviously. I kept on telling them, no, you shouldn't do this. And no, we can't help you because this is going to be a waste of time and money. They went ahead and filed the documents, and I'm sure I didn't pay close attention. They would have failed dismally because of those things. It's unattractive. It's big, but unattractive. You can't raise money for a big, unattractive company. So it's not about those key numbers. It's about how appealing is what you're doing.
So in that line of thought, what percentage of AI companies are you seeing be able to attract funding? And are there any caveats for AI entrepreneurs listening right now if they are thinking about something?
Yeah, so it's been a marvelous period of time, the last 2 years, to raise money for AI companies, of course. So yeah, we don't see many of them because most of them are getting snapped up by VCs at obscenely high valuations very, very quickly. So I would say at this point, it's getting a little bit less that way. Things are getting more mature. There's still great opportunities, but it's not as easy to automatically fund an AI company now as it was a year or two ago. But anyway, frankly, if you've got a real business case that's addressing a sizable segment that actually exists, you're still going to be able to raise money for a great AI company, no question about that. And there'll be lots of opportunities, lots of companies, lots of investors will be delighted to help. Yeah, no question. So it all comes down to the same stuff, though. If you're addressing an infinitesimally small market that's never going to get to be big, why would you do it? If you don't actually have AI, I mean, there are a lot of companies that are greenwashing, they're AI washing their business. Yeah, we do AI. Yeah, we're really good. So it's got to be genuine. I mean, you know this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when would you recommend like the traditional VC dollar versus what you're doing here with like the online investors? What helps an AI startup, for example, decide between the two paths?
If we assume that VCs are interested, then you're making a choice. Should I raise money online or should I use VC? You'll get a higher valuation online from Main Street investors than you will from VC. You'll get a lot less dilution, probably half as much.
Wait, seriously? Like, so typically, for those who don't know, in the tech startup, typically like 20 to 30% dilution per round, per financing round. Can you share comparables with this alternative
about
path?
half as much dilution, literally half as much dilution in a Reg A plus we're protecting the investors from being misled in lots of ways that we are required to, but we're dealing with Main Street investors, so anyone can invest. Now, we can only invest things that are easy to explain. We can only raise money successfully for companies that are easy to explain, that are compelling, that are doing something worthwhile, that is strategically obviously good. So some companies are doing business-to-business business models that are boring or difficult to explain. That doesn't lend itself to online. The AI part does. The rest of it is more difficult. So that's going to be a factor. The sort of thing that pushes people towards raising money online via our methods, they don't want to give up control. They don't want to get booted. They don't want to risk being fired by the VCs.
Yeah, do you take a board seat?
We can, but we don't. We don't need to.
Wow. All right, hang on. I'm taking notes and telling all my friends.
Yeah, this is very democratic, right? So it's literally, we're helping companies succeed via this method, and they're getting less dilution. They're getting a large number of investors. None of them are super powerful. So you're not as threatened by those investors. They don't normally get board seats. So it is a lot more secure from that point of view. If you're worried about being booted, or if you're worried about the strategy of your company being remodeled by the VCs. So those are the sort of things that come into play.
And when you say anyone can invest, do you literally mean anyone? For example, through AngelList, you typically still need to satisfy the requirements of being a high net worth individual or high income individual.
Yeah. So you're pointing out something incredibly deficient in what I've said so far. So Reg A plus, anyone can invest. You don't have to be wealthy. Anyone of any wealth level. And as far as the SEC, the US regulator, says, they can invest from any country in the world that is a legitimate country, not North Korea. Mostly comes from US investors. So yeah, the Jim or Ethel, the receptionist, can invest $300 in a company and get some stock in the company because they love it. So it's truly democratic access. And most of these investors aren't aware that they can do this kind of thing, or don't get to see offerings like that, attractive companies to invest in.
Yeah, I had no idea because I'm on AngelList as an investor. I've joined like syndicates and things like that. Let's say like someone listening wants to invest $5,000 in startups. What are the next steps for them to actually be able to do that?
So essentially, go online and search for Reg A plus offerings, or the term I use is crowd investing. We don't do Reg CF. Regulation crowdfunding is for small raises up to a maximum of $5 million. We don't do them.
Is that like the Kickstarter type of thing?
Kickstarter is donation-based crowdfunding. So you're putting money up where you may never get anything, or you might get a product at a discount because you put money up, but you're buying a product if it comes to exist. Crowd investing like this is you're buying equity in a company that you love. Reg CF is one way. Reg A plus is those are the two best methods for Main Street investors to invest in companies. And places like AngelList, we do investments for accredited investors as well. But accredited investors, they have so many opportunities because they are accredited. The SEC says, hey, you're sophisticated. We don't need to protect you. And so they have a bazillion investment opportunities all day long. Main Street investors haven't got such a wide swath of opportunities, and it's relatively new to them. And that's why I launched this company 9.5 years ago.
Yeah, I honestly had no idea. I'm used to seeing the accredited requirements, know, and that's pretty normal. I had no idea this option existed. So this is really great because some people do ask me, I don't fit the accreditation requirements, but I have this amount of money and I would like to invest in up and coming startups in these verticals.
A lot of people get pleasure, I think. I mean, I've done a lot of this, so I have a reason to believe this. To some of them, they're betting on a company, they're betting on the team, they're betting on the opportunity, and they join on board for a vicarious entrepreneurship journey. Yeah, I put in $2,000, and I love them. And I think it's going to go great. And now they're paying attention and continuing to monitor it, maybe putting in more money later. But it's literally a matter of full disclosure, very open kimono style being obviously necessary. You're very familiar with all of that. And that's what works. When you can explain it, and when you have a CEO or founder who is willing to do short videos updating all the audience that are interested to know about the company, but in a very candid style, it can work beautifully well. People get a sense of ownership, not just buying ownership, but feeling of ownership.
And supporting a mission or an industry that you want to see do well. Healthcare, biotech are really great examples of that.
Yeah, right.
Well, thanks so much for joining me today, Rob. Can you explain again how folks can find you?
Yeah, so my company name is Manhattan Street Capital. So manhattanstreetcapital.com. You're welcome to visit us, and you can post queries there. My email is rodturner@Manhattan Street Capital. Happy to hear from you guys. We're on social media, of course, as well, and look forward to hearing from you. We've got a whole raft of content as well as our chatbot. It's called Rodbot, which is sort of okay, I guess, my name.
Yeah, I can't wait to try it out. All right, thanks so much for joining me. Really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you, Sabrina.